been several weeks since the federal government suspended the operations of the micro-blogging site Twitter in Nigeria. The federal government has told a federal high court in Lagos that it has not stopped Nigerians from using the social media platform Twitter. The Attorney General of the Federation, Abubakar Malami, says that many Nigerians are still using the microblogging social networking service every day without hindrance. Mr. Malami and the federal government said this in a counter affidavit that they deposed to in response to an originating motion filed by a human rights lawyer, Inibe Effiong. The Buhari government on the 4th of June 2021 suspended Twitter following the deletion of a tweet by President Muhammadu Buhari, mad social media giant. The lawyer who took the case to court is on the program tonight. Mr. Inibe Effiong joins us virtually, and in our Abuja studio is Mr. Daniel Buwala. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for coming tonight. I think we should begin the conversation from the man who is aggrieved and got to court, dragged the federal government to court, and what is the latest is. Now, Mr. Effiong, you took the federal government to court over the suspension of Twitter, but the federal government has responded in the deposed affidavit. Give us a sense of what to make of the federal government's response, and when are you back into the hearing of the case?
Thank you for having me. I want to begin by saying that the merits of the matter, the case that I have filed, is going to be determined by the court, whether it is meritorious or unmeritorious. What I will speak to is my position as a citizen. Now, I went to court because, as you have rightly, correctly and factually stated, and incontrovertibly so, the federal government of Nigeria suspended the operation and accessibility of Twitter in Nigeria, and you can also describe it as the ban on Twitter in Nigeria. This is beyond dispute. They went further to even say that media broadcast stations, including your own medium, should not patronize, should not use the platform known as Twitter. That was pursuant to the directive or the advisory of the National Broadcasting Commission. They didn't stop there. The chief law officer of the Federation, Abubakar Malami, Attorney General, even issued a threat to say that anybody who defies the suspension was going to be arrested, was going to be prosecuted. It was on the basis of this action, of this declaration, that I went to the court to say that as a citizen of this country, I have the right under Section 39 to express myself. And that right includes the right for me to impart ideas, for me to receive information. For example, I follow Channels TV on Twitter. Channels TV have been barred from using Twitter to send information, to communicate to their followers on Twitter. What that means is that when I wake up every morning, I cannot rely on the Twitter handle of Channels for receipt of information. I cannot also communicate effectively because the access to Twitter in Nigeria has been banned. It was on the basis of that I said that, look, if this is a democracy, if this is a country that believes in the rule of law, we cannot wake up in the morning and be confronted with such an arbitrary decision. We cannot live in a country where the government can determine whether citizens should use a social media platform or not, simply because the fragile ego of the president was bruised when the president's controversial tweet was rightly deleted. And now they are saying that, oh, we did not suspend Twitter. Nigerians are still using Twitter. They even said that, look, Nigerians are still using Facebook. Nigerians are still using WhatsApp. That we have not tampered with the use of Twitter. And in another plea, they are saying, oh, we will lift the suspension if Twitter complies with laws of Nigeria. I do not know what laws are. Those laws that they will have to establish that in court. But the point is this. Even while the ban was still in force, the federal government of Nigeria went on an Indian app known as KWO, and opened an account on behalf of the federal government of Nigeria. That app does not have an office in Nigeria. That app is not registered with the Corporate Affairs Commission. That app is not traceable to any Nigeria. Again, officials of the federal government, including spokesperson of the government, went and opened accounts with that Indian app that is not traceable to Nigeria or any Nigerian, regulatory agency. So when they make this comment, when they make this denial, Nigerians should not be surprised, because we are dealing with a regime that denied deploying soldiers to the Lekki toll gate, which has now been proven to be false. We are dealing with a regime that told us they are technically defeated Boko Haram, which has now proven to be false. We are really dealing with a regime that has chronicles history, litany examples of telling lies to Nigerians, of misrepresenting facts to Nigerians, of doing things in the morning and denying it in the night. Therefore, the point still remains that we must continue to hold this government accountable. We must continue to fight for the rule of law, to insist that this government must comply strictly with the promises that they made to us in 2015, with the promises that they made to us in 2019. Do not forget, Buhari would possibly not be in office today, if not for Twitter, if not for Facebook, the same platform that they used to come to power. They now want to destroy those platforms because we are ventilating our grievances, because that has become the medium through which Nigerians can express themselves. This is why this is very important. And that is why I went to court to challenge what I consider to be an irresponsible, reckless, authoritarian, unacceptable, and preposterous decision of the federal government of Nigeria. I do not believe that this is a military dictatorship. So if this is not a military dictatorship, no minister of this government, not even the Attorney General, not even the President, should wake up in the morning and say, you cannot use Twitter. Even under the military, before such decisions are taken, they will issue decree, like Buhari did in Decree 4 of 1984. In 1984, when he introduced obnoxious degree to gag the media. Under a so-called democratic dispensation, no such law exists. In fact, Lai Mohammed even went to the National Assembly and appeared before their committee in the bill seeking to now seek powers to regulate social media, which is an admission that, look, ab initio, they had no power to do so.
This is an initial motion and a response by the counter affidavit. So without having a prejudice to the case, to the substantial case, and without having to be subjudicial in the conversation, looking at what the meat of the matter which took you to court is, let me allow Mr. Daniel Bwala to respond to some of the issues that you have raised. Mr. Bwala, let me allow you to respond. How does it come to you, the grievances of Mr. Effiong? He feels that his rights have been bruised, that his rights have been infringed upon by the decision of the federal government to suspend Twitter.
Well, thank you for having me. I will not comment on the merit or demerit of the case, or even raise the issue of local standi on the ground of class action or personal suit. That is left for the court to decide. But I will tell you that the federal government of Nigeria suspended Twitter based upon the demand of the federal government. And the federal government made clear the demands or the condition for restoring Twitter in Nigeria, to wit, that Twitter should register in Nigeria as a company and Twitter should pay tax in Nigeria. So this is what I will say. Twitter is a business venture. Twitter is not a civil society organization. Twitter is not a non-governmental organization. Twitter is not a human rights association. Twitter is a business venture created for the sole purposes of conferring upon itself economic benefit. In England, Twitter is registered as Twitter UK Limited, and it is a private liability company having a staff of 140 plus staff base, and they pay their tax in England. Twitter pay its tax in the United States of America and a number of other countries. In all the countries where Twitter registered, Twitter pay its tax, and these countries do not raise the issue of banning Twitter because Twitter haven't registered in those countries. Twitter has acquired a legal personality. Therefore, Twitter can be sued or be sued either by the government or by individual in those countries. So it will be foolhardy for the countries that Twitter is registered in to talk about banning Twitter. What these countries do in law is, one, to fine Twitter. And you find that last week, the Prime Minister of England, after this racial slur against these footballers that lost penalty in the England final, the Prime Minister made clear that if Twitter do not respond to some of the demands by the United Kingdom, they are going to legislate on Twitter, that is censure Twitter, and they are going to place a demand that Twitter be placed with fine of about 10% of its global revenue. That is what a country that Twitter is registered. In all the other countries where Twitter is not registered, they do not have a legal right to sue Twitter. They do not have a legal right to fine Twitter. In fact, France even attempted fining Twitter. Twitter has not paid shishi till today. But what these countries do is that they exercise political and economic decision, which is to ban Twitter pending compliance. The procedure for Twitter's response to the request by country is 1, notice, 2, takedown request. And if this is not obeyed, they will proceed to fine. Those who argue that Twitter is a human right platform, therefore, not having an access to Twitter amounts to violation of fundamental human right, should first ask themselves, if Twitter is a human right platform, why is it that Twitter's operation is not consistent with Universal Charter for Human Rights and international conventions on the right? Twitter as an organization set rules without providing the standard upon which those rules are to be obeyed. Twitter arbitrarily can delete tweet and delete account without the right of appeal. If these procedural steps in Twitter is what is practiced in the common law court, we will call that a kangaroo court. As a matter of fact, after Twitter banned Donald Trump, it raises a conversation now in Cornell University, in Harvard University, in Yale. How free is the free world from take owners? A few billionaires in the Silicon Valley now sit to determine what is human right and what is not human right. The reason why Twitter is an economic and a business venture, and that their decision to take down Twitter account is guided by community response. So, for example, Sheun, if I say, except a man be born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God, that is the exercise of my right of expression to express my faith. But if I say that on Twitter, and community of people come together and ask Twitter to take down that tweet because it is offensive, Twitter will obey them. Twitter is guided by its customers. Whatever the customers do, that is what Twitter, in fact, that is why Twitter, when you register with Twitter, you will find that Twitter says you waive your right of liability on them in any respect, and you are bound by their decision howsoever they place. Let me land in this fashion by telling you this. Out of the countries that have the highest number of registered Twitter, United States of America has about 70-point-something million users, followed by Japan. Then you have India, which has 18.8, and then England 18.4. Now, unfortunately, of all the African countries in the Statista report, only Egypt was put in there. But it is a known fact that Nigeria has over 30 million subscribers. And if you are to factor that into the statistics, Nigeria is number 3, containing highest number of Twitter users, only behind the United States of America and behind Japan. Why should a country with the highest number of Twitter users not be able to demand what America demanded, what England demanded, that you come and register as a private limited liability company and pay your tax? So Twitter is not a human rights organization. Twitter is a business venture like MTN, like Airtel, and like every other business that exists. If individuals use that platform for the purposes of engagement, that is wonderful. But it does not take away the core objective of that company, which is that they are registered to operate for providing information technology services and to benefit therefrom.
So I'll go back to Ms. Inibe Effiong, who believes that this issue is fundamentally a human rights issue. And you think that your rights have been infringed upon. But let's draw up the conversation around injury that could be meted out while using Twitter, and some of the issues that are being raised about some of the users of Twitter and those who are on the receiving end of Twitter. issues of regulation, if you're talking about human rights and you're talking about those who are felt the pinch of abuses on Twitter, how then can we balance? Because in the face of the law also says where your own rights end is where other people start. I mean, your rights end just at the tip of my nose, so you cannot infringe upon my right. What about the issue of regulations? How do you tackle that kind of matter?
So let me respond very quickly to the blatant hypocrisy, the seeming attempt to mislead Nigerians. President Muhammadu Buhari has a Twitter account with millions of followers. Indeed, a verified Twitter account. The Vice President Osibanjo has a Twitter account. The Attorney General Malami has a Twitter account. The Federal Minister of Information and Lai Mohammed, they all have Twitter accounts. All spokespersons of the president, they have Twitter accounts. They have been tweeting with those accounts from 2015. APC, All Progressive Congress, has a Twitter account verified. They have been tweeting since 2015. They never said Twitter doesn't have an office. If they are now saying that Twitter has violated a law by not registering with the Corporate Affairs Commission, are they saying that the President of Nigeria, Muhammadu Buhari, the Vice President, Professor Sibanjo, the Attorney General Malami, the Minister of Information, Lai Mohammed, are accessory to a crime? Because having known, if they are saying that what they have done is unlawful, and the President had a Twitter account and was still tweeting with those accounts, were they now aiding and abetting the violation of the laws of Nigeria, contrary to their oath of office, to uphold the law? They should resign. If they are convinced about the argument, let them lead by example. They should deactivate their Twitter accounts. They haven't even done that. Most of them have not. Only the wife of the president deactivated their account. So this has nothing to do with regulation. This has nothing to do with Corporate Affairs Commission. Do not forget I said that even while this argument was going on, they went and opened an Indian account with an Indian app called Go, KWO, KOO, on behalf of the federal government of Nigeria. That does not register with CSE, does not have any office in Nigeria. This is about the tweet of Buhari that was deleted. Now you ask the question. This has nothing to do with regulation, because the social media itself is a self-regulatory agency. Unlike the conventional media, social media is the platform where anything you say, you either regulate yourself or you are regulated by the other user. And I will explain. If I tweet something now, or I post something on Facebook, immediately, other persons on that platform will come to challenge me, to demand for evidence, to demand for corroboration, to demand for substantiation. That is how the social media works. It is a medium that has
apologies, anybody. The question I asked earlier is about injuries that are being received by people on the receiving end of some of the abuses on Twitter. For example, there are issues of those with extremist tendencies. Some, for example, who are even asking for the killing of Nigerian soldiers who are out defending the territorial integrity of the country. How then do you are you able, or what would you say to this in curbing the excesses that are rampant on a social blogging site?
The point is simple. Any tweet that is posted on Twitter must conform with what is called the community standards of Twitter, which is the regulation of Twitter. If that tweet is found to offend or to contravene the community standard, other users are entitled to report that tweet. And let us stop allowing the government to distract us with sentiments. I am not aware of any instance where somebody tweeted something that offends the community standard of these platforms and that such tweet was not taken down. In fact, Twitter has suspended, deactivated hundreds, if not thousands of accounts of Nigerians on account of the content of what they tweet. So let them give us an example. They mentioned the case of Nnamdi Kanu. Twitter has taken down several tweets of Nnamdi Kanu. If there is a specific tweet that they are referring to, they should come out and tell us. Show us the example that they had made formal representations to Twitter.
So, I mean, in essence, do you think that the government of the country where Twitter operates, for example, in Nigeria, should they be able to hold Twitter accountable for what is being done on that platform?
Twitter is already being held accountable. I've explained to you that first, Twitter is self-censoring. But if they are saying that they need the power to regulate Twitter, you cannot start regulation through sanction. You see, this is the impunity that I'm talking about. You cannot wake up in the morning and say, I am suspending your platform because I want to regulate. No, you must go to the parliament. Go and put an enabling law in place. Shehu, as I speak to you today, there is no law, to my knowledge, that authorizes the government to do what they have done. And I will tell you why. After they had done this, Lai Mohammed went to the National Assembly. In the amendment to the NBC Act, there's a provision that they are proposing to give them some regulatory power over social media. What does that tell you? They knew ab initio from the word go that there is no law in place that authorizes them to do what they are doing. And this is the president, this is the minister, this is the government that's supposed to be bound by the rule of law. People held the Bible, people held the Quran. They swore to uphold the Constitution. You cannot bury the Constitution under democracy.
All right.
You cannot supplant the rule of law for the rule of might.
Let me come back to you, Mr. Bwala. The big question is the motive behind the action of government and what has become a suspicion from many Nigerians who think that considering the human rights climate in Nigeria, perhaps the action of government is unbecoming. So in quote, because that's the feeling like someone like Mr. Effiong is having, that this is sinister, this is not right. Considering the issues of human rights and some of the matters that have been raised in the last few months or so, or the last year or two or more, what do you make of the action of government on Twitter? Should they have done it in the first place? Is he properly advised? Should they have gone in another way to act on this?
Give me the same time that you gave Effiong when he demonstrated this emotional exegesis. First of all, let me respond to the first point. He said that Twitter and social media, they are self-regulated. False. The characteristics of a self-regulated body: number one, they have standards of conduct. Number two, they have disciplinary procedure against erring members. And number three, they have right of appeal. Twitter does not have that. Nigerian Union of Journalists is self-regulated. They have standard of conduct, they have disciplinary procedure, and they have right of appeal. Nigerian Bar Association is self-regulated. Nigerian Medical and Dental Association is self-regulated. The social media as it stands today, they are not self-regulated. As a matter of fact, because they are American companies, they are demonstrating, they are demonstrating the judgment of the U.S. Supreme Court in Reno versus ACLU, where the Supreme Court expanded the interpretation of Section 230 of Decency Communications Act to say that the right and powers of social media extend to them determining what they put out, what they take out, without necessarily explaining the reason behind what they do. The problem here is that the judgment of the Supreme Court is not binding on Nigeria. And number two, the judgment of the Supreme Court of the United States does not have extraterritoriality in Nigeria. That's why if you go to Twitter page, you will see that the privacy rules, the social engagement rules that applies in the United States is different from this application in European Union and elsewhere. So if you take honors in the Silicon Valley, determine what they do. For example, he said that Twitter, that they are self-regulated because they have community rules. Ask him, what is the standard for measuring the community rules? Ask him whether there are applicability of those rules are across board. In the case of A, they will take down tweet without explaining. In the case of B, the same reason for which A was torn down, B will be left there. And that is the reason why, even in England, last week, I'm not talking of last year, and England is a country where Magna Carta was signed, where the mother of all human rights. The Prime Minister of England said that they are going to legislate to put liability for 10%. They are giving OFM the power to fine Twitter 10% of its global revenue. But they are extending it to criminal liability. They said in the coming legislation, they are going to place criminal sanction and prosecute the directors of Twitter. That's what we are talking about. A country that is serious. Let us forget about all these emotional exegesis that people bandit here and there. Is Twitter a business venture or a human rights organization? Is Twitter regulated? What are the standards of regulation? Is Twitter, is it, in fact, the fifth columnists, what they do all over the world is that they use this social media platform that gain access all over the world to cause civil unrest and regime change. I went for a course in the United States Institute of Peace. If you go there now, there are some of the courses that are related to civil disobedience. And civil disobedience is the strategy which some people use in regime change through the back door. Because the proper way of regime change is at the poll. But you cannot wait till the next time when you will remove the person at the poll. So you conjure some things, heat up the polity there, and then get the masses to then say that person must, be resign, must resign. Any nation that is what is onions and is serious will not allow any of these type of manipulations to govern the laws that govern operations in Nigeria. If human right rule is not observed, Inebong, your man, cannot be there talking. What has he not said about the government? Has the government touched him? And we have had media interventions and expressions in other social media and in print and electronic media. So how can he then talk about Facebook that you transact business with for commercial benefit? Nigeria, like the government said, we are not stopping Nigerians from using Twitter. We are holding Twitter to account, asking them, come register, pay your tax, and then operate. So what's the big deal about that? Let us stop all this emotional exegesis and look at law. He has not been able to mention anything law. Oh, President Buhari has Twitter. Oh, Minister of Information has Twitter. Does having a Twitter take away the fact that Twitter needs to come and register in Nigeria? Twitter is registered in the UK. They pay their tax. Twitter is registered in America. They pay their tax. Why won't Twitter not be registered in a country that is number 3 of the highest users of Twitter in the world? Please, let us be serious.
So you've not answered the part of the question that I asked, that there is a climate, a human rights climate in Nigeria before and around the actions of government in suspending Twitter. Is that the right move by the federal government to take, considering its human rights record?
There is a human rights climate all over the world. In America right now, the Antifa and the Black Lives Matter movement are complaining that their rights are being infringed. If you go to England, the blacks and Nigerians are complaining about discrimination in place of work. There is no part of this world where human right is not an issue. That is why United Nations is constantly advocating that countries should observe. Even if you look at the United Nations guiding rules, they say all private entities and organizations must conform to the ideas of human rights. Now, bringing it back to Nigeria, I cannot tell you that human rights is not an issue in Nigeria. I mean, it goes without saying. But my focus is that what we have learned over the years, anytime somebody is losing argument on point A, he tries to generate emotional issues all over in the hope that he will take out that issue. Sheun, you guided us in your conversation today, Twitter. So it doesn't matter human rights climate in Nigeria or outside of Nigeria. The act of Nigeria asking Twitter to come and register and pay tax, is it right? Is it lawful? Are there countries that are doing the same thing with Nigeria, or is Nigeria operating outside of its own? I've been able to establish to you that the country of Magna Carta, they are even going beyond civil liability, talk about criminal liability. And I told you that they are registered there. The home country where Twitter was established, they paid their tax. And so Nigeria is asking for the same. It's a commercial venture. You make profit. We have 30-something million subscribers. Come and pay. When you have paid, then you can raise issue of human rights violation and all that.
Let's close the program now and allow my guests 30 seconds each for their closing thought. Mr. F. Young, your closing thought just in 30 seconds.
Mr. Shehu, this is the Twitter account of Mr. Dan Deboala. You can see it. Essay, Legal and Constitutional Matters to Deputy Senate President Nigeria, Notary Public, Barrister and Lincolns in London. Look at it. He has 4,066 followers. He has not deactivated his Twitter account. You see the hypocrisy I'm talking about? You are saying Twitter has no legal basis to exist in Nigeria, but you are still operating a Twitter account. That is an admission against interest that your argument is morally, ethically, legally flawed. He said that, look, I am being emotional. I think that is not true. That is very far from it. Those countries that he has cited, ask him. He mentioned the law in the US. Where is the law in Nigeria? He couldn't say it. He couldn't mention the law that authorizes the government to do what they have done. He said that Twitter doesn't have is not self-regulatory. That is blatant falsehood. Why was the tweet of the president taken down if Twitter is not regulated? This argument that he's making can only have basis if it is founded on
30 seconds is over, Mr.
This is an argument that is founded on falsehood, and Nigerians can see it.
Let me allow Mr. Bwala his own 30 seconds on his final thought. Mr. Bwala, your 30 seconds for your final thought.
Right. So, Shaun, I would only beg you to help me tell Ophiong in the language you will understand. Does having a Twitter account has anything to do with Twitter should come and register in Nigeria and pay taxes? That is the subject matter of conversation tonight. So having a Twitter account, does that then negate the fact that Twitter is a business venture? Does it change the fact that Twitter needs to come and register? Please help me explain to him even after this program.
Daniel Bwala, lawyer, member of the Lincoln's Inn, London. Thank you so much for your time tonight. And Mr. Ophiong Inibe, the man who took federal government to court over the suspension of Twitter. Thank you so much for your time, gentlemen.